I refuse to believe that Silverleaf was a dystopian novel, so I want to introduce to you guys a dystopian novel that haunts me to this day, and I've read this like years ago, and I want to talk about it because I think this is one of the best dystopian books that has been written to this day. I want to introduce you guys to Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I hope I'm saying his name right. This is one of the, like I said, best dystopian novels that I've read in a very long time. It is not action-packed. There's not a lot of like political speeches. It is just one of those hauntingly beautiful, written without restraint novels that I think just does such a good job of really honing in that question of what it means to be human, and when society strips you from, your identity away from your, human nature. This is a horrifying, almost, I don't even want to consider it a thriller, but it had like that thriller aspect to it, because though it was without its like action-packed or like rebellious speeches or rebellion, it had this like very slow, almost mundane acceptance to it that left you kind of reeling and being like, oh my god, this is almost like a reality. The story follows our main character, Kathy H., and it is reflected through her eyes, where she is reminiscing and looking back on her childhood and when she was sent to this boarding school called Hailsham. She mentions her childhood friends, Ruth and Tommy, and she kind of goes over their like complicated relationships in the past, kind of like their dramas that they had in high school. She also brings up how she used to work as a carer, which at first you don't really know what that is. It's a very vague term, and then over time you understand what that is. But the more you read this book and the further you delve into the story, the more you realize there's something seriously wrong about it. There's something that's just very creepy, and you don't know what it is, but it's like at the tip of your tongue. I'm going to be very clear, this isn't a coming of age story. It is about children being raised for one purpose, and that is to die and give up their organs at the end of their life. But unlike most dystopian novels where like The Hunger Games or Divergent or 1984, where there's rebellion, there's fight back, there's pushback, there's like, how dare you treat us in such a manner, Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go is a slow, painful acceptance to the very end. There's no fighting back, there's no rebellion, there's no nothing. There's just, like I said, a slow, painful acceptance of who these people are and what they're there for. Let's talk about the setting. The setting takes place in England at the school Hailsham, the school is supposed to be shoved down your throat as very progressive, very elite. And you have our three main characters, Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth. I would say that the tone and style of this book is like quiet, haunting, slow. It's not your stereotypical dystopian novel where it's like always, again, fast-paced, action-packed, what have you. It is narrated through memory, so you've got a lot of nostalgic vibes to it. It's very reflective, non-linear. It is very emotionally restrained, which is like a breath of fresh air when it comes to literature, and it makes it feel more realistic and also very disturbing. Even though this is like a 250-page book, there are like at least 5 key themes that I noticed in this book. There's humanity and identity, there's acceptance and resistance, there's love and relationships, there's memory and nostalgia, and there's this idea of freedom or like illusion of freedom, essentially. I want to dive in deeper in each of the themes. So the first one that I had mentioned was humanity and identity. First of all, the clones in our stories are never treated as human beings, even though they show like signs of being human. Like, they're creative, they're emotional, they have empathy, they have all these qualifications that make you human. And that, again, I think Ishiguro asks the question in the entire story is, what makes a person human, and is it biology or consciousness? The entire book is about acceptance and versus resistance, because again, most dystopian novels, at the base of it or the root of it is this idea of freedom, of rebellion, of pushback. What makes this story so clearly haunting and disturbing was the fact that all of these clones had this calm acceptance. Like, they're accepting their death, their fates, that yes, they were created and born to just be organ donors. Their calmness is literally what makes this terrifying. And it kind of is like a play on us living in our society of just kind of like almost calmly accepting all the shit that's happening to us, Obviously, the biggest theme in this book is memory and nostalgia, and we clearly see that through the eyes of Kathy. She's telling the story through her memories. It feels almost like a comfort mechanism for her, like she's using those memories as like a safety net or safety blanket to conceal like the pain that she went through. A lot of times when we're traumatized, we use nostalgia as like a way to prevent us from seeing our past clearly and what we actually went through. I can say she was an unreliable narrator, but there were moments that I was like, I feel like you're using this to soften the blow of what actually really happened to you, and the fact that yeah, you're traumatized, that you grew up believing to accept your fate, that all you're ever there for is to be raised for slaughter. Love and relationships is another theme that I noticed in here. You've got the three characters, and they have a very complicated love triangle with one another. A lot of it is a mirrored reflection of adolescence. Love gives them their meaning, though. That is something I noticed, but it is not what saved them in the end. There is a final theme that I noticed in here, and this was the illusion of freedom, or a false sense of hope, where they kind of give them this idea, the clones, that they have bodily autonomy, that they can make choices. In reality, like, they're always 10 steps ahead of the clones. Like, they never have a choice. In the end, it's always the same, never changing. For example, like, they'll be like, oh, if you choose love, then, you know, there's a delay in donations. If you do this, there's going to be this. So, like, again, they never have a chance to make an actual choice for themselves. Ishiguro brings up a lot of great social commentary, and not just like in a sense about clones, because obviously at the root of the story it is about clones, but it brings up questions like, how do we see disposables in our society? Like, how does the system justify suffering versus, you know, how does it, you know, justify benefiting for others? Like, who are the first class? And because, like, we never really get to see who the people that are benefiting off of the organ donations are in this book. We just know they exist, kind of like in our real world. Like, who are these first class people that benefit off of our suffering and off of our disposability, you know? The quiet tragedy I noticed in the story was that clones don't lack souls, that they lacked options. There's always this idea or this conversation or even debate that clones, when they're created, they are born without souls because they're man-made versus God-made, right? The tragedy in the story is not dramatic, it's resigned. And they have been taught not to hope. And that, again, is so tragic. To imagine growing up in a world where it's like, accept this horrific thing that's going to happen to you and have absolutely no hope. I could not live like that. And I think what had me bawling in this story was not them dying, but the fact that they died not having the ability to live or think that they could ever live freely. If there's one thing Ishiguro knows how to write, it's how to write in a very subtle manner. There is no violence in here, there's no pushback, there's no villains, there's just structure. And I feel like it's very difficult to read, but also just to write in general. The horror at the core of the book, the horror isn't what's being done to them, but just like how little they question what's being done to them. Obviously, this is a slow burn dystopian novel because, again, you as a reader are slowly accepting that this is the reality of all these clones. Honestly, my final takeaway of this book is 5 stars out of 5. Absolutely amazing. Yes, it is a commentary on our society, or a dystopian society, but honestly, it felt like a mirror. Like, we already live in this kind of dystopian world, in my opinion. I think everyone needs to read it, especially with what's going on, and keep your mind open. With that being said, I'm gonna go. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay hydrated, be kind to yourselves, and free Palestine. Bye!